Good morning and happy Lunar New Year to everybody. The Doctor is Inclusive series was born of our collective desire to educate ourselves about the challenges facing underserved communities with respect to health and wellness, and to also learn what we as a passionate, committed global industry could do to lead change. When Mahatma Gandhi said, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world," for sure he had met Nicola Finley in another life. Nicola is a physician, board certified in internal medicine, fellowship trained in integrative medicine, and an adjunct faculty member at the Mellon Enid Zuckerman College of Public Health at the University of Arizona. Currently, she runs a boutique consulting business which focuses on health disparities, employee wellness, and women's health. Her client roster reads like a who's who in the wellness world and includes the Breakers Palm Beach and Six Senses hotels, resorts, spas. For the Breakers, Nicola developed and implements an ongoing comprehensive employee wellness program for employees of color. This is what Denise Bober, Senior Vice President of Human Resources at the Breakers, had to say about Nicola. Working with Nicola is a true delight. She is undoubtedly an expert in her profession, coupled with a warm and engaging persona that shines through with the utmost care and love for others.
There's two possible explanations.
Nicola is dedicated to changing the lives of those she meets by fortifying their health outcomes and sense of well-being. When Nicola's focus turns to women's health, she partners with Six Senses in Ibiza, leading a women's retreat this April called The Pleasure Principles, Journey of Women's Sexual Wellness. Anna Bjurstrom, wellness pioneer of Six Senses, had this to say about Nicola. Nicola is a joy to work with, uber professional, very thorough, and takes time to understand first before trying to be understood. That is a rare thing that we need more of in this polarized world. In addition, Nicola is knowledgeable and seeks to find ways to heal not only physical, but also psychological. I congratulate anyone who gets to bathe in Nicola's wisdom. And aren't we lucky we get to do that today? Nicola previously practiced integrative medicine at Canyon Ranch and delivered healthcare for medically underserved communities in Arizona. I have had the distinct pleasure of introducing Nicola a few times now, both virtually and at summits in person, and I'm sticking with my initial thought. She's a graceful disruptor. She moves conversations because she leads with honesty and heart. Nicola uses the language of respect to talk about some of the most challenging topics of our time. She serves on the advisory board of the Global Wellness Summit, and we are thrilled that she leads this virtual series for us. Today, Nicola, along with her special guest, whom she will introduce, will help us navigate the often choppy waters of conscious and unconscious bias in the transgender community. This doctor is most certainly inclusive. Please welcome Nicola Finley.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for that warm introduction. And I never know what Nancy is going to say when she introduces me, so I appreciate it. I'm thrilled to host this series. Both Nancy, Susie, Kendra, everyone in the leadership position at the Global Wellness Summit, they have supported this series. We helped develop this series together in partnership. And I am thrilled to be able to do this in partnership with the Global Wellness Summit. I am going to introduce our guest speaker, Jessica Lynn, after I do a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation. So I will share my screen and I will go ahead and get started. And we are going to be talking about wellness in that, I apologize. Let me just make sure I can see everything on my screen. And let me just move this over. Okay, that's good. We are going to be talking about wellness in the gender community. Our guest speaker lives in the UK, Jessica Lynn. I have learned so much by talking with her. I am thrilled to have her as part of this presentation as our guest speaker. what I will be doing is I will be, let me see why this is not advancing. Oh, here it goes. I will be reviewing terminology. If anyone's been part of our webinar for the Doctor is Inclusive, you'll know that I always like to review terminology as well as talk about health disparities. We'll be talking about health disparities in the transgender community. Jessica Lynn will share her inspiring story. Then you all will have opportunities to ask questions of Jessica. So if you want to start putting any questions in the chat from now, feel free, or when Jessica is speaking, then we'd like to hear you share your stories. That's part of this web series, is to have you share your stories. And I'll mention the next webinar will be May 10th at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So let's go ahead and start with the terminology. Terminology changes in all fields, including this one. I'm getting the terminology from the American College of Physicians. This was published in 2019. So let's start with transgender. It describes persons whose gender identity does not align with their sex recorded at birth, which is usual based on visual anatomy at the time. This is an umbrella term which Jessica will talk about in detail. And these are two examples of many examples. There's transgender men, transgender women. Transgender men have a male gender identity that were identified as female at birth. Also, we could say assigned female at birth. And then transgender women would be the opposite, to have a female gender identity, but were defined as male at birth. So assigned male at birth is the key. There's also non-binary, so the gender identity is not female, not male. And I'll let Jessica, when she speaks, go into a lot more detail about that. I think it's important that we talk about gender affirmation. It means different things to different people. And this is from the American College of Physicians. It's alignment of physical characteristics with gender identity. And it's an individualized process, and it could include social affirmation. So that's coming out, being accepted and supported by friends, family, neighbors, coworkers. Legal affirmation, legal change of the name, change of the gender marker on identification forms, and some don't change their name. Could be medical affirmation, so hormones, surgery, voice modification, and psychological affirmation, which is acceptance of one gender's expression, one's own gender identity and expression. But there's another aspect of gender affirmation, and that's what we in the wellness community can do, and that's creating a gender affirming environment. And that's really that idea of showing respect and acceptance towards the transgender community. So that's avoidance of misgendering, so using correct names and preferred pronouns, correct gender identity, using gender neutral terms, and Jessica will talk about this in more detail. The last term I want to touch on is cisgender. That refers to persons whose sex recorded at birth aligns with their gender identity. So really someone who's not transgender. So in the last few minutes, I'd like to talk about health disparities and talk about social determinants of health before I introduce Jessica. You can read on the screen what those health disparities are that the research shows that we know exist for transgender community as well as trans youth. And this data is coming from the Duke University Health Systems, a review article that I read. And this is from 2018. As you know, we want to share stories, and I think it brings things to light. And so I'd like to share a story. So as Nancy mentioned, I'm a physician, I'm a primary care doctor. And when I was taking care of patients at a local community health center here in Tucson, I had a transgender patient. And for the first 2 years, I didn't know he was transgender. He didn't share that with me. He had to make sure he could trust me to share that with me. And when he did, I realized he wasn't getting high quality care before because I didn't know to do a pap smear for him. I didn't know that he had a cervix and a uterus. I also, unfortunately, was experienced with him a bias against him in the medical community. I referred him to a specialist for a medical condition, and he made jokes about my patients and was very disrespectful. And when I saw the specialist, continued to make jokes. So I educated him and why that was completely inappropriate. And it was really a journey for me as a clinician, because I ultimately started to take care of his hormones, his cross hormone therapy, but I never learned how to take care of transgender patients when I was in medical school. I went to medical school in the 90s. I never saw one transgender patient. So things have changed. Now there is education for the medical community. Advocates and activists like Jessica can educate us. So we are improving, but we still have a long way to go. Lastly, social determinants of health. I'm going to read a few statistics because anytime I do a presentation, I know Nancy and Susie in particular like statistics, and these statistics are quite unfortunate. 29% of the transgender population lives in poverty compared to 12% of the US population. Transgender individuals are less likely to have health insurance than heterosexual or LGBT counterparts. So I think this is really important to be aware of, including, unfortunately, frequent violence and victimization. And what I wanted to bring light to is the importance of intersectionality. That's that idea of someone's identity who is a gender minority, so perhaps transgender, and also in the BIPOC community, so a person of color. And there's been an increased murders in transgender women of color, unfortunately, in 2020. So we know that it is really important for us to have this conversation. So I am thrilled that as a wellness community, we can welcome Jessica and also learn from Jessica. I'd like to introduce Jessica Lynn. And I'm going to end my stop sharing the screen so that we can all see Jessica. Jessica Lynn is a world-renowned transgender advocate, educator, and activist. Her experience as a transgender woman and parent led her to dedicate her life to spreading awareness and acceptance for gender non-conforming communities around the world. Over the last several years, Jessica has traveled over 1 million miles, visiting 28 different countries, presenting over 1,000 times, helping to educate the general public, business, and medical communities, as well as on university campuses about the transgender community. Jessica has been appointed to an advisory position on a project aimed towards improving health services for gender diverse youth and their families throughout the UK, by both the University of Oxford and the National Institute for Health Research. She also continues serving as the Kinsey Institute Global Ambassador at Indiana University. Currently, she lives in the UK after relocating from her birthplace of California. Jessica, thank you for joining us, and please welcome Jessica Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Finley. I appreciate it. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk. I don't need to talk too much, Dr. Finley. You're already getting, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing you. As she said, my name is Jessica Lynn. I do a lot of education awareness programs, and I'm really sad that we only have a bit of time because I could spend 4, 5, 6 hours with you going over everything that Dr. Finley just spoke about, terminology, awareness training, all about this kind of stuff. We all need it. I do a lot of work here in the UK with the NHS, the National Health Service, and that's one of my prime objectives, to do it with the medical community. But one of the greatest ways we have found by helping people understand what it means to be transgender is by telling personal journeys. We have found this one of the greatest ways, because it is hard to hate someone whose story, I absolutely love that statement by Andrew Solomon. To me, that's a very, very powerful statement. So today you're going to hear a bit of me and my story. My name is Jessica Lynn, and this is my journey, my story, my truth. I am just one of the many, many millions of people in this community. This is my story and my story only. Just like you guys have different journeys, different paths, different lives, this is my story and my story only. Please, please never compare me to another transgender person, just like I wouldn't compare you to another cisgender person, right? So I was born Jeffrey Allen Butterworth, January 29, 1965. So actually it was my birthday the other day. I'm now 57 years old. You can see how old I am, these old black and white photos. I mean, I was just a typical little boy. We always had dogs in the house. I had 3 brothers and an older sister, and here I am with my brothers. But as far back as I can remember, 3, 4, 5 years old, I wanted to live the life of a girl. This is 1968, 1969. The term transgender, the first time it was ever coined was in 1965 at the University of Columbia University. So we didn't have anybody to talk to, and it was torture. And my mom was a Christian woman, and she said, Jeff, if you pray hard enough, God will move mountains. So I was at my hands and knees begging God night after night, day after day to turn me into a girl, crying myself to sleep. I would go to school in 1970, so I'm 5 years old. I would go to school with my very best friend, Michelle. Here I am, 5 years old, go to school with my very best friend. After school, we go to her house and we played dolls. We played tea party. We played dress up. At this age, I wanted to be my very best friend, Michelle, and that did not make sense. Like I said, this is 1970, and it tortured me, and it became unbearable. And life went on, became harder and harder and harder. How do you tell somebody at that time period when you're 5, 6, 7 years old that you want to be a member of the opposite sex? Now I'm not saying, God, turn me into a girl. I'm saying, God, if you cannot turn me into a girl, take these damn feelings of wanting to be a girl away from me. It doesn't make sense to a child 5, 6, 7 years old. But the feelings didn't go away. They just grew stronger and stronger and stronger. And life went on, became harder and harder and harder. So what I did was I used different activities to stop me thinking about wanting to be a girl. I collected bugs, collected stamps, used outside activities, and I started painting. And so I'm painting these paintings when I'm 7, 8, 9 years old. So when I have that paint behind my hand and I'm painting that picture, I am not thinking about wanting to be a girl. And I obsessed with it, and I become better and better and better. When I'm painting that eagle for 2, 3, 4 hours when I'm 10 years old, I am not thinking about wanting to be a girl. And I became a damn good artist. I painted this when I was 11 years old in one 6-hour sitting. For that 6, maybe 7 hours, I was listening to those waves crash, smelling that ocean. And this was my escape from reality. It's a very, very common in the older LGBT world coping mechanism. This is what we did. Well, my parents were British immigrants, if you heard me saying it. And at a young age, they introduced me and my brothers to the game of soccer. They joined me up in AYSL. And back then, I didn't want to play soccer because back then girls didn't play, only boys did. But I found it was the next coping mechanism. When I was on that field for 90 minutes trying to get that ball in that net, that became my next greatest coping mechanism. And I started obsessing with it and kicking the ball before school, practicing and practicing, becoming better and better and better. And this became the greatest coping mechanism, as you can imagine. And I became a pretty damn good soccer player. 15 years old here. I was an under 19 team in the United States based in California. We were so good, we were rated number 2 in the United States, and I'm the youngest player on the team. I walked up the field once. I had 4 scholarship offers in the 1984 Olympic Games, asked me to try out for the 1984 Olympic team. That's what kind of player I was. But again, it was a coping mechanism because I wanted to be a girl. And how do you tell anybody this in the 1980s? It just did not make sense, and life went on. So when boys and girls go into high school, boys and girls start dating. I wasn't particularly interested in girls. I had crushes on every one of my friends except for Alberto. I didn't have a crush on him. He was a good player, but just not my cup of tea. But when I was 17 years old, I met a young girl named Barbara. Barbara was beautiful. She was kind, quiet. She had the greatest sense of humor. Her and I became really good friends. And we started a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. She had the greatest sense of humor. We started a relationship. And I came out to her when she was 15 years old. She flipped out. She says, you know what, Jeff, I accept you. Maybe one day these feelings will go away. And she loved me and accepted me for who I am in 1982. I had no idea. I had no understanding about it. Like I said, this is 1982. The only word we knew back then under the phrase transvestite, crossdresser. Maybe one day these feelings will go away. So, but Barbara and I became inseparable. When you saw Jeff, you saw Barbara. We were together 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And on Christmas morning, 1984, I proposed to her, asked her to be my wife. And she said, yes. Oh my God, yes. So now the year is 1985. I'm living in Southern California. I'm the envy of every guy in Southern California. Had a beautiful girlfriend, monster truck. and my life was going okay. We went through a few difficulties, and she said, you know what, Jeff, if you need to become a woman, I will stay with you. I love you, and I accept you for who you are. So everything is going fantastic, and it's Christmas time, December 5th, 1985, and I picked Barbara up from work this day, and we're driving home. We go and have lunch. We're talking about Christmas and its wedding and all this kind of stuff. We're driving home in San Fernando Valley in Southern California. We're driving northbound on the way home from work. She's sitting right next to me, got the music cranking. There's a guy hanging Christmas lights on the right-hand side. It's Christmas time. We come to this intersection at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday, December 5th. As we come to this intersection, a lady that's high on heroin and drunk at 1 o'clock in the afternoon in a 1972 Cadillac ran a red light at 65 miles an hour, broadsiding us. A moving truck this size hit us head on head, where we rolled another 5 times. You can imagine how horrific that car accident was. That's me on the stretcher being put into the helicopter, taken to Northridge Hospital. I died several times in the helicopter. I broke my neck and my jaw was completely shattered. You can imagine how dark my life came from that moment on. I'm airlifted to Northridge Hospital. They bring me back to life, and I'm in a coma for about 3 days. I'm 20 years old. Never have I ever been to a funeral before. Never seen a dead body. The next time I got to see Barbara, she's lying in her white coffin in her white dress. My mouth is wired shut, and I'm begging her to wake up. You can imagine how dark my life came. I turned to drugs and alcohol and had no idea how to escape this pain. I attempted suicide 12, 14, 16 times. I had no idea. My life had just completely fallen apart. And this went on for about a year and a half. Then in June of 1987, a friend of mine calls me. He goes, hey, let's go to your mom and dad's house. And he picks me up. We drive over to the Central Valley of California, go to my mom and dad's house, and I go to sleep for a few hours. And my mom wakes me. She goes, hey, Jeff. And we started a long conversation. And during this conversation, it came out that my mom and dad knew I wanted to be a girl since I was 4 years old. They wanted me to stop drinking. And I said, why didn't you do anything? I was so angry at her. And she said, we planned on transitioning you when you're 5 years old. In fact, we took you to a world famous doctor. He was considered one of the best in the world. He came from Johns Hopkins University. He was doing a stint at UCLA, and his name was Dr. John Money. He was considered the very best doctor in the world. But Dr. John Money's theory was, it's nature versus nurture. The way you raise a child is the way this child's going to become. Dr. John Money convinced me, moved him away from his shell, to keep him away from sports. And this is exactly what immerse him in sports, keep him away from his friend Michelle, keep him out of his sister's closet. So my parents took the advice of Dr. John Money. So that moment was a huge moment. I came out to my mom and dad wanting to look, act, dress, and live as a girl. I wasn't ready to come out sexually, and I was still confused. I was dealing with Barbara's death, post-traumatic stress. But at the time, there was not a lot of terminology. I had no idea. But that was the last time they ever took a sip of alcohol or any type of drug. I've been 100% sober. Ever since that moment on the rock in June of 1987, I did not need that coping mechanism. But back then, the only word we knew was transvestite. And that's not what I was. I'm not a cross-dresser. That's what I was. Then I started finding out more and more about the terminology transsexual. That's somebody like me that wants to completely transition genders. And that's more of a sexual terminology. Then I started finding out more and more about other people in our transgender community. As Dr. Nicole said, Dr. Finley said, there's a lot of terminology. Facebook alone has right now 64 different terms under this transgender umbrella. You go to different countries. I do a lot of work in South Africa. Go to Japan. There's different terminology worldwide. And this is what it is. No two of us are the same. Each and every single one of us have a different identity, just like each and every single one of you. And it's also a very fluid community. I know people that had no idea that they're transgender until they're 40, 50, 60 years old. So, but I went through a few years. Do I transition? I was dealing with Barbara's death sober, and I started planning my transition. I moved down to Southern California and wanted to raise some money. And I met a young lady. Her and I became friends. I told her what I was doing. She goes, I'd help you. And she started working with me, getting close, started helping me with my transition. We ended up pushing my transition aside. She got pregnant. We pushed my transition aside, even though she was 100% fully accepting, but she got pregnant. And we had a little boy, Jeffrey Allen Butterworth, August 8, 18, 1991. So here I was, the perfect father, absolutely perfect father, and I had a stay-at-home mom. Then we had another little boy, little brats. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing. But now we had two little boys at home, a stay-at-home mom. The relationship between me and their mother started to fall apart. We went through a divorce, and the judge ordered joint legal physical custody. We ended up getting back together and having a third child, Curtis Russell Butterworth, my little ginger. So we ended up getting back together. We bought a small house in Reseda. We sold that house, and we moved up to Central Coast of California, and we bought a new 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. The day we closed escrow, Rachel called her boss, quit her job, and says, I want to go back to work, school full time. We made arrangements. We started planning it. So she moved it. I ended up starting now to work 7 days a week, and the relationship between me and their mother fell apart. Finally, I come home one day. She takes her youngest son, Curtis, moves out of the house, and she said, you raised the older 2 boys. I said, no, you do not split up children. I offered a place to live. I offered her money. She wanted nothing to do with it. You have your life. I'll live my life. So in turn, I filed custody for all 3 boys, which started a 3-year legal battle that cost me $65,000. During this 3-year legal battle, a full psychiatric evaluation was ordered. She goes into the evaluator and says, she went on to say she found pictures of me wearing women's clothing. When she asked him about it, he admitted wanting to live his life as a woman. Mr. Butterworth, she went on to say I had a secret life going on. This goes in front of the judge in Van Nuys, California in August of 2007. The judge says this is one of the most difficult cases I've ever decided, but in all my years, I've never seen such an incredible father, and gave me full legal physical custody of all 3 boys. Curtis moves back into the house and everything's fantastic. Long story short, her and my son Jeffrey and Curtis went down to Southern California with their mom one weekend. Curtis and his mother were in another massive car accident. She spent another week in hospital. Curtis, and the doctor says she has to be bedridden for about a month. I said she can come stay with us. And we ended up moving to the Central Valley of California with an arrangement. And I said, no, she wanted to get back together. And I said, no, I need to transition. She said, let me help you. I will work with you. I will help you. So I rented a 5-bedroom house. She was in one room. I was in another room. And I put her through medical school to become a dental hygienist. She said, you have my 100% support. You tell the older 2 boys, all I ask is we wait till Curtis is a little bit older. You have my 100% support. So we make appointments with doctors. She's helping me. She's working with me. The time came. She graduated. Jeffrey graduates high school. We load the whole house of belongings. They moved to Plano, Texas. Long story short, I went through a little difficult time. I flew to Texas in Christmas 2009. During that trip, I came out to my eldest son. He says, you know what, Dad, you've always been there for me. You have my 100% support. I came out to my middle son. He goes, you know what, Dad, you have my 100% support. The day after Christmas, I took my youngest son. I said, I'm going away for a little while. And going, why? And I said, your mom and I have made arrangements. I'll just be in California. The most difficult decision I ever made. But if I did not do it, I would not be alive today. Came back to California, spring of 2010. I threw away all my boy clothes and I started living as Jessica. I was now comfortable living my gender, but I wanted my surgery. So on September 17, 2010, I flew to Trinidad, Colorado. Dr. Marcy Bowers gave me my whole surgeries and I became me. That was the day I hatched from my cocoon. That was the day I became me. So these are just pictures of me as I'm going through my transition. Now my son Jeffrey and I are now living together in a condominium in California. Him and his girlfriend in one room, I'm in another. My son Brad is back and forth to California, no issues. My son Jeffrey is the most accepting, open person. My son Bradley is no issues. I'm on the phone with their mom all the time. I'm on the phone with my youngest son 3, 4, 5 times a day. Hey, Dad, and everything is just going fantastic. I'm doing well. I'm getting a little bit more surgeries, female feminization, and I'm starting to become more and more comfortable in my true gender. You can see just as the pictures move along, and then this is the latest picture. But we're going to go back now. We're going to go back to 2012. My son Jeffrey and I are living together. Him and his girlfriend in one room. I'm in another. His girlfriend's out of this picture because he's not with her anymore. But we're back at 2012. And now my youngest son, he's 12 years old. This time we tell him, I start calling their mother saying, Rachel, this time we tell them. Suddenly she cuts off all phone communication between me and my two boys. Jeffrey can't get a hold of his mother or brother. I'm emailing, texting her, no response. I buy a plane ticket to fly to Texas. Before that plane ticket comes, I receive a letter from the state of Texas. Rachel Butterworth, my child's mother, has filed a lawsuit to take away my parental rights. I hire an attorney. Every attorney says $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. I said I have full custody. We have an agreement. Every attorney saying $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. I finally find an attorney, part of the LGBT community, says yours is an open and shut case. You have full custody. You have an agreement. No worries. Wire me $2,000. We went in front of Judge Scott Becker in Collin County Court, Texas. Judge Scott Becker says two orders. You're allowed to speak to your child via the telephone, but if you tell your own child that you have transitioned, I will personally come to California and throw you in jail. He says, second order, it is ordered. If I don't do this, I go to jail. That Dr. Ben Allwritten is to do a full psychiatric evaluation on me on or before January 31st. They give me his business card and I start calling him. And long story short, I get an appointment and this is the doctor that they ordered me to give me my psychiatric evaluation. He's a professor in biblical counseling. My attorney calls the judge and says, can we have a different evaluator? And the judge says no. So long story short, they go back and forth to Texas several times. The evaluator came back with a 22-page report. But what it does say is parenting neglect, concerns about parenting neglect by Miss Lynn were not substantiated in the information gathered in this evaluation. On the contrary, collateral sources describe me as a conscientious, caring parent. It is recommended that Miss Lynn participate in individual psychotherapy during the reunification process with my son, Curtis. My attorney says, you've done it, Jessica. They fought it. They said it was bias. And the judge agreed. We went into court, said, here's your court-ordered evaluation. The judge would not allow it. Long day in court with my brother as my attorney. The judge, Scott Becker, said, I'm never allowed to see my little boy. Judge Scott Becker said, because I am transgender, my parental rights have been terminated.
Excuse me, Jessica, in 5 minutes, could we have people start to ask you questions? It's such an inspiring story.
Yeah, that's perfect timing. So now this judge told me that I'm never allowed to speak to my little boy, never allowed to call him. Curtis is never allowed to say, Merry Christmas, Dad. Hey, Dad, I scored a goal today. Hey, Dad, I'm going to the prom. I am never allowed to speak to my little boy ever again because I am transgender. 2 psychiatric evaluations. I had full legal physical custody, but because of the bias in this from this judge, he went and said, I'm never allowed to see my child again. My case went everywhere across the United States. Later that year on Christmas Eve, I come home from work and there in the mailbox, yellow envelope, to Jessica Lynn from her attorney. There's a stamp on the envelope, Saturday, 21st of December. I open it up. There it is, dated December 20th. Please find an enclosed copy of an order of termination. They mailed this to me just to say, F you, Jessica, you will never see your little boy again. Merry Christmas, Jessica. Here's another knife in your belly. I sat there crying in my car, shaking, going, why would they do this? They didn't stop there. Page 4 of that same document, this judge went as far as removing my name off my child's birth certificate. It was signed and dated September 20th, but this judge went as far and said, according to the United States government, my child does not have a father anymore. He erased my existence out of my little boy's life. 2 psychiatric evaluations. I had full legal physical custody, but because I am who I am, I'm never allowed to be with my little boy. My case went everywhere. It went all the way to the Department of Justice. They came back and they said, there's not much you can do about it, Jessica, but it's illegal for him to take your name off your child's birth certificate. I sent her the paperwork, and it turns out that this is the first and only time in US history that a biological parent with a supportive active role has been erased of a child's birth certificate. They said there's not much you can do about it, but what you can do is use your story to help educate the world. Because Nelson Mandela has the most beautiful, powerful statement ever said: education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. So I started speaking and speaking and speaking. I've traveled the world, just like Dr. Finley said. I've traveled over 1,000,000 miles. I mean, next week I go to America. Following month, I go to America, Slovenia, Poland. I do this all over the planet. This is what it is. You guys are the next generation. You're the next teachers. Well, you know, and you guys are the ones that are going to write the rules for the next generation. This was just a brief talk about it. So I do hope you enjoyed a little bit of my personal journey. And sorry if I went a little bit long.
Jessica, your
So
personal journey, like I said, is so inspiring. I would love for the participants to write questions for Jessica in the chat. I have a bunch of questions for Jessica, so I'm going to start. I had mentioned misgendering, but I think it's important to hear, well, if you can please define misgendering, but why is misgendering important? Why do we use pronouns? Tell me, what does that mean in the transgender community? I'd love to hear from you, and then we can hear from other participants with questions, and then they can share their stories.
Misgendering is one of the most common, one of the most painful things that are done towards the transgender community. You know, you guys are familiar with Laverne Cox. You guys know Laverne Cox, beautiful Laverne Cox. When she started her transition in New York, she used to carry her number around, her phone number, her address, her mom's name, because it was just a matter of time. Because of misgendering, she was going to take her own life. It's one of the highest issues of suicide in the transgender community. And there's two things you've heard, maybe: misgendering and dead naming. Dead naming would be calling me Jessica Lynn Jeff Butterworth, calling me by my birth name, my dead name, my name that I was born. That's what you would call dead naming, all right? And that's one of the same things. But misgendering is some of the most painful thing in the world. That's coming to me and calling me he, him, his, calling me male pronouns. And when you don't know, when you have somebody like me that comes into your office, comes into your place of business, comes into your classroom, comes into your work, and you don't know, there is nothing wrong with very, very quietly asking, saying, hi, my name is Jessica. I use she, her pronouns. Can I ask you your pronouns? Not preferred pronouns. This is a thing that you do not want to use. Do not say preferred pronouns, because that suggests that it sounds like it's a suggestion, you know, that it can be done. But just ask, what are your pronouns? Very quietly, very nice, and it's very, very rare you're going to have somebody that gets upset. When I go to the campuses in different parts of the world, professors still come up to me and just saying, I just want to make sure, are your pronouns she, her? Yes, thank you for asking. This is what I want. So that is a very, very simple thing. But the misgendering is some of the most painful things in the world. And it really, really hurts. You really have no idea. We try so hard. I have workshops. I do these workshops. And you think about me, I transitioned at 45 years old, 45 years of male testosterone poisoning. I have so many things to hide: bigger hands, bigger feet. I'm lucky where I have my own head of hair. Trans women have bigger, broader shoulders. You're trying breast, vocal pitch, different facial features. These are things that the transgender community on both sides constantly have to hide, have to try to do, just to blend in so we don't get misgendered and don't get dead named. It's some of the most painful thing in the world. And you really have no idea how difficult it is to when something like this happens, you know?
Jessica, thank you. And see, I always learn from Jessica. So now I know not to say preferred pronouns. I've never knew that. So that's why I very much appreciate that. I don't see lots of questions. So I'm going to ask one more question. And if anyone has a question, please put it in the chat. But I'd love for people to share their stories after I ask Jessica one other question. So if you participant wants to share their story, yes. Please.
So I've been watching the chat as instructed. And I just want to say, first of all, Jessica, there is nothing but love for you in the chat. So you will get a copy of the chat, and you should definitely take a look. People are, really inspired by what you're saying. I would just like to know where on earth you found the strength in yourself to do what you have done in your life. I mean, it's just every curve and roadblock has been put in front of you, and you've overcome it all and just more than overcome, you've really thrived. You've created this incredible advocacy. I mean, where did you dig? What did you do to dig down and find that?
Every single one of us, however many there are people that are watching and listening to this right now, we all have a story. We all have a path. We all have hardships. Every single one of us does. We all have issues. Mine just happens to be a little bit different, right? Does that make sense to you, right? My thing is I am a firm believer that tomorrow the sun will shine. The seasons change, that there's always a chance that things will get better. Does that make sense? I firmly believe that if we keep doing this, that we're going to make a difference in this world. You seriously have no idea how many letters, emails saying you've completely changed my view. You've really completely opened my mind. I had a child that came out, I spoke at Mississippi State about 7 years ago, and I got an email about 6 months ago. And they said, I know you don't remember me, but I saw you in the big auditorium at Mississippi State. My child came out as transgender. You saved my child's life from that talk 7 years ago, 6 years ago. That's the kind of thing that really knows. That's what gives me the inspiration to keep doing this and keep doing it as much as I can. Most people don't pay me. I run a nonprofit in California called Your True Gender, a McKinsey Institute. They cover some of the costs, but this is what it is. I am a pure, true advocate. That's where I think that we're going to make a difference to make the world a more equal place. And that's what I think gets me going. And lots of coffee. I drink lots of coffee.
Susie, did you want to add anything? I want to make sure I give Susie Ellis an opportunity. I see some more questions in the chat, but Susie.
Well, I'm so moved by your testimony. Thank you. And I will just add, a piece of, of what I experienced. I was on the Governor's Council for Physical Fitness for California, and Bruce Jenner was on that council. There were 15 of us. And so I knew him before he transitioned. And so your story, I'm struck by the fact that you were saying that you got so involved with sports. And, I've heard his testimony, and that's what he did, becoming, the champion that he was. So what you mentioned, to hear two people say that, really helps me understand that, boy, it must have been so challenging at that time, and going to do something like sports. But I have to also say that I hope you're still doing art, because are you still doing art? That would be my question, because you were terrific what you showed us.
Thank you. Actually, give me 1 second. I want to show you something. Never mind, it's not here. I thought it was in this room, but it's not. When COVID hit, I started picking up a brush again. Okay. And I started picking up, and it was just literally amazing on the artwork, on how it came back to me, no, I appreciate that. But going back to, Caitlyn Jenner transitioning from Bruce Jenner, it's very common. On my longer presentation, if you're a part of a business or an organization that wants me to come and do some training for your network, please bring me in. I do my personal presentation. That lasts roughly an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes long. And I talk about Caitlyn Jenner. I talk about a few people that do exactly what I did, obsessed with things. And it's very common. The older LGBT people community did this kind of stuff to stop their mind from these dwelling thoughts of wanting to be somebody. I know gay guys, older gay men, that put it into mathematics or into writing or into literature, or whatever it was. It's a very common outlet to do these different type of things. I have a friend that became a Navy SEAL, several Purple Hearts, one of the toughest people you can ever imagine. And Kristen Smart, and they did a documentary on her on CNN. She became a Navy SEAL, and that was her coping mechanism. So it's very, very common.
I see questions. Nancy, do you want to field those?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Josh Herbert asked, what makes a space, business or otherwise, feel safe to you as a trans person?
There's a lot of different things. You teach your employees not to stare, not to ask inappropriate questions. Me as a transgender woman, I am an open person to tell anybody what I can. I was at Middlesex University down in London yesterday, and this is what it is. But how many people watching this right now have ever been asked if they have a penis or a vagina? Truthfully. Anytime I come out to somebody as transgender, that's the very first question. So do you have a vagina or a penis? Have you fully had your surgery yet? That's none of your goddamn business unless you're taking me out to dinner, you're going to sleep with me. That is none of your goddamn business, but this is what happened. These are the kind of invasive questions that I am just a normal, everyday person. You treat everybody that walks in that door with the equality, no gawking, no staring, no asking inappropriate questions, learning to say their names, learning their pronouns. If you don't know somebody, the simplest, easiest way to do it is to say they or them. Use non-gendered language. If you don't know if somebody picks up the phone, don't say, hello, sir, hello, ma'am. We're taught as young kids to do that, but let's lose that. Let's just use they, them. If you saw somebody walking down the street that's far away and you didn't know if they were a man or woman, would you say, oh, look at him or look at her? You look at that person over there, right? It's the same thing that you should do just as this. If you don't know, don't automatically assume. And it's it's okay for us in a community to be asked. You don't say across a classroom, say, are you a boy or a girl? Are you a man or a woman? Very nicely come up to the desk and say, can I ask you, my name is Jessica Lynn. I use she, her pronouns. Can I ask you your pronouns? And that kindness goes huge, huge way. So I hope I answered that one. But I have
Yes,
information.
absolutely. And Jessica, Kendra Kobler on our team, who you met earlier, asked, how is mainstream media and entertainment, TV, books, podcasts, helping to bring awareness to transgender stories and their wellness needs? And do you feel like that media is a helpful educational tool?
Here, I don't watch a lot of television, to be 100% honest. I don't have time, but over the years, when I was a child and you saw a transgender person on TV, you never saw a transgender man, but you saw a transgender woman because they were more easily identifiable. You saw them say they were a prostitute or a drug addict. That's all you saw in media. Nowadays, we have a lot of trans representation in media, and it's becoming more and more positive. So there's a lot of good websites. There's a lot of good books out there. There's a lot of really positive information. You don't want to look for the sleaze on the back of magazines. You don't want to listen to the Daily Mail here in England, or you know what I'm saying? But you really look at some of the good stuff, and there's some really good information where people are learning a great deal. When I was a kid, nobody knew a transgender person. Now, if I said how many people know a transgender person, I would almost guarantee you half of you guys in this thing know a transgender person. And this is just what it is. More and more people are becoming comfortable coming out. We still have a difficult time coming out. It's not as good as what we'd like, but would still like to to do that. Somebody wrote, just approach each person as a person. Absolutely. That I could not agree more. Everybody's different. Everybody has a unique story. There's 7.8 billion people on this planet. That means that there's 7.8 billion different labels. All right. Look around this room right here. Everybody has a different skin tone, different height. Some people wear glasses. Some people have blonde hair, have dark hair. This is what makes the world beautiful. Diversity. This is what makes us unique, and they should celebrate it and not put us all in a box to make us all,
Jessica, this is a wellness group, as you know.
Yeah.
And there's a great question from Andrew Hammond. How can spa professionals make you feel comfortable and safe in an environment where you may need to undress to receive treatments?
Just like I said, staring, no gawking, just treat people with respect as an individual, okay? And I think that's one of the greatest things is no stalking. Oh, you have a penis. Oh, you have a vagina. You know what I mean? That's none of anybody's business. No no criticizing them of who they are, what they are, of their dress. I mean, sometimes you have these really big, huge, obese people. Are you going to criticize that person if you're going to do something like that, a spa? People criticize people for no reason whatsoever. Just when it boils down to it, treat everybody with equality, treat everybody equal. I think that is the very, very best way. It's uncomfortable for us to come in to a place like that to say, you know what, I'm going to come in, I'm going to undress. I myself have had my surgery. So, but for somebody like in my position that's not had their surgery, Kendra wrote, I know inclusive spas that ask for pronouns in the intake form. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. There's a lot of different ways to become just more inclusive, and
lots of people also, Jessica, will share with this group and all of the people who registered for this call links to whatever you want to share. People who teach want videos of you. You're probably going to get an awful lot of calls and emails so that people can contact you on their own and invite you to be part of what they're doing and more education, which is great. There was one question from Claire. How do you feel about statutory legal changes for support around the misgendering use of correct pronouns?
Say that again. What do I think of?
How do you feel about statutory legal changes for support around misgendering and the use of correct pronouns?
I don't understand that question. What do you mean statutory?
Claire, are you still on the call? Can you unmute and let us know what?
I'm just trying to think because go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much, first of all, Jessica. I'm finding this really inspiring and educational, so thank you very, very much. I'm talking about, I suppose, state legislation. So what can be put in place at the highest levels to support the transgender community? That's what, and I suppose another part of that is what changes have you seen from the horrific way you were treated by the judicial system to now? Have there been enough changes? There more that can be done?
So policy changes, legal changes that can support. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It seems like we go 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. It really, really does. Here in England, we have an organization, a bunch of TERFs is what you call them, transgender exclusionary radical feminists, that are really trying to shut down transitioning youth. There was just a big major lawsuit going back and forth with courts last year, and it turned out is they said, okay, no more youth can get pubertal suppressants. Then it was overturned. So there's a lot of back and forth. So when it comes to a lot of legal changes, it is moving forward. They use my story in textbooks at Columbia University. My story right here has helped change the law in Hyderabad, India. So things are moving towards a better world. We get 1 step forward or 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You have a governor in DeSantis in Florida right now proposing anti-LGBT education of people under 18 years old. That's 2 steps, that's 5 steps backward. That's Hungary type stuff, that's Poland type stuff. We need to not let that kind of stuff, and we need to really move forward. We have Transgender Law Center, Google them. They do a lot of work, but things are moving forward. And it is taking some time because, years ago, Alfred Kinsey was one of the first people that really opened up the world into the LGBT community. And that's where I'm part of the Kinsey Institute. But the thing was, it used to be when he started researching and learning about homosexuality, he would go to the prisons because that's how far it was. Stonewall, it was illegal to be gay, be transgender, be lesbian. This is the pushback that we're fighting. We want a better world. So there is movement. It's not there yet. There is movement, but we need to keep education. And this is where I really, I speak at a lot of law schools. I spoke at Yale, Stanford, Harvard. Yesterday was a law school. These are the people that are going to make the changes in the next generation. They really, really are. So we do have to move forward, and vote what you believe in. That's one of the greatest ways to do it. And I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to do 3 updates on my story. Is the judge is no longer a judge. okay, which is a good thing, right? My son is now 22 years old. I found him in California. He relocated to California, but we've not connected yet. My son Jeffrey is my #1 biggest ally in the world, and his mother, he hasn't spoke to his mother nor his 2 brothers. My middle son originally during the court battle was very supportive, and then he turned sides. He was living with his mom. So like I said, my son Jeffrey is my greatest ally. And how many of you would like to see this on the big screen? Think this would be a good movie? The screenplay has been written, okay? They actually handed the screenplay to Sandra Bullock to play Jessica Lynn, and I refuse, saying it has to be a transgender woman. So keep your eyes out. So, that's my thing,
Why don't you star in the movie?
I can't stand being in front of a camera. I hate even being interviewed for, I'm okay right like this.
Come
doing
on, you're a
lectures,
natural.
but, but I've done some television and stuff, and I just not my cup of tea, But,
Jessica, you are amazing. And so I just
Oh my
want to
God, I
share
love
that
it.
Jessica and I have been emailing and Zooming since I think the last fall. And we've been,
Yeah.
putting this together. We have 3 minutes left. Perhaps no one wants to share their own story, but Jessica, is there anything you want to leave us with? Any inspirations? We have learned so much from you. And I think you've inspired all of us. And I'm looking at the chat. Any last thoughts you have, Jessica, for us in the wellness community?
Just treat everybody equal. Everybody. There's nobody that's above us. There's nobody that's below us. I am the same as the Queen of England here, the same as that kid starving in wherever. There's nobody above anybody. Just treat everybody with respect, equality, and kindness. And that is one of the greatest ways. I think this world will be a better world. And I do see positive changes coming. And thank you. And just say a nice word and learn. If you don't know how somebody identified, ask. Do not just assume. That's a great way to do it. Never assume. There's a couple good books. There's Trans Like Me is a good suggestion of a book, and Transgender History by Susan Stryker. I was going to recommend a couple good books. If you want to learn more about the transgender community, here's a couple really good books. Trans Like Me is phenomenal. So these are a couple good suggestions. So I really appreciate, and like I said, my website is jessicalynn.co.uk, and I have several emails, but jessicalynn347@gmail.com or jessicalyntalks@gmail.com. Feel free to send me if you want me to come to your organization. If you have a business, if you have a spa that you want to do a little bit of awareness, even if it's 5 employees, this is what I do all over the world. We can do it from my home here, or we can do it anywhere else,
Jessica, I'll let Nancy close, but you are so approachable. And I think there's a little bit of fear that some people might have around this topic to make sure we don't get it wrong. And you've really taken those barriers down. And I appreciate that. You're amazing. And I'll let Nancy close us out.
All I can say is thank you to Jessica, and thank you so much to Nicola for opening our eyes, educating us, turning us all into advocates. And, together we can really make some change. And, we represent different companies, different countries, different walks of life. And, we all have a role to play in changing things. And I'm just really honored to have heard your story, Jessica. And now you're in our tribe. There's no getting out. I'm just going to tell you right now. We'll be sharing all your information. Everybody will get it in the follow-up. So don't worry. We'll send email addresses, videos, links to everything, so you can get in touch with Jessica too. And really, you're an inspiration.
Thank you. And there's never, you can ask me any question, send me an email. You know what I'm saying? If you have a family member, a sister, a brother, a child that you want to talk about, I will do a Zoom call one-on-one with you. I may be in a different time zone, but I get up at 2, 3, 5 o'clock in the morning to do these. It's not a big deal. This is what I do. I want to do whatever I can to make the world a better and more accepting place. And I really appreciate and thank you guys so much. It's been a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. Morning for you.
I think Everybody.
Thank
Jessica,
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
keep
Thank you,
changing.
Jessica.
You're a
Thank you.
blessing.
Nicola.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
Inspiring.
You're a
Thank
blessing
you.
to our world. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys are beautiful and awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. Remember, I'm just one story. There's many, many, many wonderful people out there, you know, and so thank you.
And our next Doctor is Inclusive is on Tuesday, May 10th at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So we'll see you next time. And thanks again, Jessica. Great to have you. And thank you, Nicola.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye, everyone.